The rescue. Zack Walker's heart pounded as his spacecraft pierced the swirling sapphire clouds of the alien world Zephyria. He had jumped gleaming cities or advanced tech. This planet, at the edge of uncharted space, was his last hope for the big discovery that would make his name as an explorer. The ship set down on a plateau overlooking a vast violet jungle. Zack stepped out onto the spongy blue moss, breathing in air that smelled of cinnamon and ozone. Twin moons cast a silvery glow across the landscape. In the distance, jagged mountains clawed at the stars. "Well, here goes nothing," Zack muttered. He set off to collect samples, the bioanalyzer on his wrist whirring and clicking. The readouts showed a complex ecosystem teeming with exotic life. But as the hours passed with no sign of intelligent beings or artifacts, Zack's hopes began to wane. A blood-curdling howl sliced through the darkness, freezing Zack in his tracks. It sounded close. Too close. Hand trembling, he drew his pulse pistol and scanned the undergrowth. Silence. His breathing sounded like a roar in his helmet. A bush quivered. Zack spun, finger on the trigger. What emerged was no monster, but it stole his breath all the same. A creature resembling a huge silver wolf staggered into the clearing, its body sleek and rippling with power. But what captured Zack was its eyes, orbs of swirling galaxies, shimmering with intelligence and soul. Dark blue blood matted the wolf's haunches. It fixed Zack with that mesmerizing stare before its legs buckled, and it collapsed to the ground. It whimpered, an almost human sound of pain that wrenched Zack's heart. He holstered his gun and approached slowly, hands out. "Easy there," he murmured. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The wolf watched him, eyes like starlight. No fear, only an uncanny calm. As if it understood, Zack knelt and activated his med scanner. The wolf's sleek body was marred by savage gashes, claw and bite marks. The wounds were serious but treatable with the nanosutures in his kit. Zack hesitated. Regs stated no contact with alien life forms without a full hazmat protocol. But another whine from the wolf shattered his resolve. To hell with Regs. He couldn't let this magnificent creature suffer. "All right, bud," he said softly. "I'm gonna patch you up, but no biting deal." The wolf blinked slowly, a gesture that felt like assent. Permission. Hardly daring to breathe, Zack set to work. He sprayed the wounds with antiseptic, then injected the nanosutures. The wolf flinched but held still, watching him with those fathomless eyes. Zack found himself talking as he worked, his voice soothing. "What did this to you, No, don't try to answer that. Though with eyes like yours, I wouldn't be shocked if you started talking." The wolf's gaze remained locked on his, strangely intent. Captivating. Zack felt drawn in, like he could lose himself in those cosmic depths. He gave himself a shake. "There, all done. You'll be good as new in no time." The wolf stood, testing its leg. It moved with fluid grace, muscles rippling beneath that lustrous pelt. Zack expected it to disappear into the jungle. But instead it padded closer until he could feel its breath on his cheek. With a shock, Zack realized he'd removed his helmet, breaking about 10 more regs. But it felt right. Safe. Slowly, the wolf pushed its muzzle into Zack's palm. He gasped. An electric tingle raced up his arm, spreading through his whole body. His mind filled with a cascade of images, sensations, too fleeting to grasp. And rising above it all, an overwhelming feeling of gratitude. Connection. The wolf stepped back, holding Zack's gaze a moment longer. Then, quick as a blink, it melted into the shadows. Zack sat back on his haunches, mind reeling. His palm tingled where the wolf had touched him. He felt different, changed in some fundamental way he couldn't describe. Shaking his head, Zack made his way back to the ship in a daze. He barely noticed his surroundings, still replaying the encounter. As he reached for the hatch controls, he froze. There, shimmering on the back of his hand, was an intricate silver marking, swirling galactic whorls, just like the wolf's eyes. Zack's heart raced. What the hell was happening? He thought of the wolf's touch, the flood of alien thoughts and feelings. One word crystallized in his mind, ringing with certainty. Lyra. Her name was Lyra. Zack gazed out across the darkened landscape, the jungle thrumming with eerie calls and rustling. He felt watched, assessed, and now bound to this world and the mystery of Lyra in a way he couldn't begin to understand. One thing he knew for sure, his life would never be the same. And this was only the beginning. Uncovering the mystery. Over the next few days, as Zack explored the jungle around his ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The back of his neck prickled constantly, though scans showed no life signs nearby. He found his hand straying to the silver mark on his skin, tracing the swirling pattern. Lyra. The name sang in his mind like a half-remembered song. He threw himself into his survey work, trying to distract from the growing sense of unease. The bioanalyzer chirped and beeped as he input samples. Luminescent fungi, iridescent beetles, flowers that chimed like bells. Zephyria's diversity was staggering, but Zack kept circling back to one thought. Where was Lyra? On the 5th day, he ventured farther from the ship than ever before, matchsheet in hand to hack through the dense violet underbrush. The canopy pressed close, filtering the light into an eerie teal haze. Strange calls echoed above, setting Zack's nerves on edge. He was just about to turn back when he stumbled into a clearing and stopped short, pulse spiking. Lyra stood at the center, her silver fur illuminated by a shaft of light. Zack's breath caught. She was even more magnificent than he remembered, her body powerfully muscled yet graceful. Her galaxy eyes found his, stealing his breath with their intensity. Lyra, he whispered, taking a step forward. She inclined her head, a very human gesture. Then her voice bloomed in his mind, resonant and ancient. Zack Walker, you have returned. Zack staggered, barely keeping his feet. You can talk. In my head, a rumble that might have been laughter. Is that so strange, after all you have seen? Zack thought of the mark on his hand, the flood of alien sensations when they first touched. He forced his breathing to steady. I guess not. But how? What are you? I am the last of my kind. The Zeph, guardians of this world. Images flashed through Zack's mind. Towering crystalline cities, beings with Lyra's eyes walking on two legs, a great cataclysm that rent the earth and skies. He gasped, doubling over from the intensity. Forgive me, Lyra said, her mental voice gentler. I forget how overwhelming the min-touch can be for your species. Zack straightened, head swimming. My species? You mean humans? Indeed. You are the first to walk our soil in centuries. A thrill ran through Zack. First contact, a dream of every explorer. He met Lyra's fathomless gaze. What happened to your people? To the Zeph? A mournful note colored her reply. War. Our civilization was destroyed long ago by the Vire, a cruel empire that sought to conquer the galaxy. We fought and lost. More images came. Planets burning, armies clashing beneath unfamiliar stars, the Zeph cities crumbling to ruin. Zack flinched from the sorrow and rage that accompanied the memories. I am the last, Lyra said, bound to this world as its protector until the final breath leaves my body. And those creatures that attacked you? Zack asked, remembering her wounds. Vire drones. They scour planets for resources to fuel their empire. They will strip Zephyria bare and leave it to die. Her mind voice hardened to steel. This must not come to pass. Zack frowned. This was so much bigger than he'd imagined. But one question burned brightest. Why me, Lyra? Why show yourself after all this time? Her gaze enveloped him, at once ancient and youthful, weary and hopeful. I have waited centuries for one such as you, Zack Walker. One with a noble spirit, a courageous heart. One worthy to be my partner in the great mission ahead. Zack's pulse thundered. What mission? To unlock the secrets left behind by my people. Secrets that could defeat the Fire and free the galaxy from their tyranny. She padded closer, her presence flooding his senses. The journey will be long and perilous. You would risk much, perhaps all. But I see the strength in you, the potential for greatness. She touched her muzzle to his palm, and again Zack felt that electric connection spark between them. Will you join your destiny with mine, Zack Walker of Earth? Will you help me save the galaxy? Zack's head spun. He thought of Earth, of the family and friends he'd left behind, of the safe, comfortable future waiting for him. Then he looked into Lyra's eyes, saw the hope kindling there, the chance to be part of something so much greater. He took a deep breath and nodded, meeting her gaze squarely. I'm in. Where do we start? Ripples of joy and gratitude flowed from Lyra's mind to his. She turned, silver tail flashing. Follow me. With a mix of exhilaration and trepidation burning in his veins, Zack plunged after her into the alien wild, the first steps of the greatest adventure of his life. Neither noticed the small, spider-like drone hovering in the shadows, its lens fixed on the unlikely pair. It whirred and clicked before darting away, vanishing into the jungle. In a ship hidden on Zephyria's dark side, a cloaked figure watched the drone's feed, metal hands clenching into fists. The last Zeph lived, and she had found a human ally. This would not do. This would not do at all. The reveal. Zack followed Lyra deeper into the violet jungle, questions burning on his tongue. But each time he opened his mouth, she would glance back with those fathomless eyes, and his words would dry up. Her presence filled the spaces between them, ancient and wild, and thrumming with purpose. After hours of trekking, they reached a sheer cliff face, its surface opulent smooth. Lyra paused, her fur shimmering silver in the perpetual twilight. She pressed her muzzle to an innocuous spot on the stone. Zack gasped as lines of white light raced outward, forming an intricate glyph. With a deep rumble, a slab of rock slid aside, revealing the dark passageway. The way is open, Lyra said, her mind voice resonating in Zack's head. Enter if you possess the courage. Zack met her galaxy gaze, saw the challenge there, the call to prove his worth. He squared his shoulders and stepped into the beckoning darkness. Lyra followed, the door grinding shut behind them. Zack's suit lights flickered on, casting eerie shadows on the tunnel walls. They walked in silence, the only sound their echoing footsteps. Minutes stretched into hours, and Zack felt like they were descending into the very heart of the planet. Just as he was about to ask how much farther, the tunnel opened up, and he stopped dead, mouth falling open. They stood in a vast cavern, its walls glittering with embedded crystals that pulsed with inner light. But it was what occupied the center that stole Zack's breath. A towering structure rose from the stone, all graceful curves and shimmering metal. It was clearly technology, but technology so advanced it looked like magic. Zack's mind flashed to the images Lyra had shared, the soaring Zeph cities, now lost to the scourge of war. Behold, Lyra said, padding forward, the last refuge of my people, the key to our salvation and our revenge. Zack tore his gaze from the mesmerizing structure. What is this place? This is where I was born, and where I will likely die, when my long guardianship comes to an end. A profound sorrow colored her mental tone. I am the last, Zack Walker. The last to remember. The last to fight. Fight who? The Fire. The Destroyers. The Devourers of Worlds. Lyra's eyes flashed, galaxies swirling with ancient rage. They came to our planet in ships that blotted out the suns. So much death. So much sorrow. We fought until our cities turned to dust and our fields ran blue with blood. But in the end, we failed. Zack swallowed hard, the weight of centuries pressing down on him. The thought of Lyra bearing this alone, the sole keeper of her people's memory. He crossed to her, kneeling to look into those fathomless eyes. You're not alone anymore. I'm here now. We'll fight together. Lyra held his gaze for a long moment, a maelstrom of emotions swirling between them. Then she bowed her great head. Yes, together. She led him towards the base of the structure. As they approached, a seamless door dilated open with a soft hiss. Zack's skin prickled with awe and trepidation as they crossed the threshold. The interior was one large circular room, its walls lined with consoles that glowed with shifting light. In the center, on a raised dais, an object pulsed with mesmerizing radiance. It looked almost like a small star, hovering unsupported. Lyra padded to the dais, Zack close behind. He watched, heart pounding, as she reared up on her hind legs, placing her front paws on either side of the scintillating sphere. And then she began to change. Silver fur retracted, limbs elongating and reshaping. Muzzle flattened and smoothed into high cheekbones and full lips. In a matter of moments, a humanoid figure stood in the wolf's place, clad in a shimmering jumpsuit that hugged her life curves. Only the galaxy eyes remained, spinning with ancient knowledge. Lyra, Zack whispered, scarcely believing what he had just witnessed. The being inclined her head, a cascade of silver hair rippling with emotion. When she spoke, it was with a physical voice, low and melodious. This is my true form, Zack Walker, the form of the Zeph, as we once were. Zack struggled to reconcile this ethereal creature with the wolf he had come to know. But when he looked in her eyes, he saw the same fierce intelligence, the same unfathomable depths. Why show me this now? He managed. Lyra lifted a hand to cradle the glowing sphere, its light threw her angular features into sharp relief. Because the time has come for the truth, for the Zeph's last stand against the darkness. She met Zack's gaze, and the weight of destiny settled on his shoulders. And for your transformation into the weapon that will turn the tide. She beckoned him forward, the sphere's radiance dancing across her face. In its swirling depths, Zack glimpsed the ghost of an alien city, a reminder of all that had been lost, all that he now fought for. He stepped to Lyra's side, meeting her eyes squarely. Tell me what I need to do. In a distant hangar, a figure cloaked in shadow watched a hologram of the pair, metal fingers steepled. It had been a long time since he had seen a Zeph in true form. Too long. So it begins, the figure murmured, a deep modulation. Ready my ship. We have a relic to destroy, and a new enemy to crush beneath our heel. The hangar bustled to activity, Vir drones marching in perfect unison. Above them, the fleet hung in silent menace, poised to descend on Zephyria and snuff out the last embers of resistance. This time, there would be no mistakes. This time, the Zeph would burn, and their human champion along with them. Preparing for battle, Zack stood before the pulsing sphere, its light casting eerie shadows across his face. Lyra watched him with those mesmerizing galaxy eyes, her humanoid form lithe and powerful. This is the heart of Zephyr, she said, her voice low and melodious. The last repository of my people's knowledge and power. With it, we may stand a chance against the Vir. Zack swallowed, the weight of responsibility settling heavy on his shoulders. What do I need to do? Lyra gestured to the sphere. Place your hands on the heart. Open your mind. Let the essence of the Zeph flow through you. Zack hesitated, fear and anticipation warring within him. Then he met Lyra's gaze, saw the trust and hope shining there. Steeling himself, he reached out and laid his palms against the warm, thrumming surface of the sphere. Instantly, energy surged through him, a torrent of light and sound and sensation. He gasped, body going rigid as the heart's power filled him, reshaping him from the inside out. Distantly, he heard Lyra's voice, echoing in his mind. Embrace the change, Zack Walker. Become the weapon we need, the champion of Zephyria, and of all free life. Images flashed through Zack's consciousness. Towering Zeph warriors clad in shimmering armor, wielding blades of pure energy. He felt their strength flow into his limbs, their ancient battle cry rising in his throat. The silver mark on his hand blazed like a star, the pattern spreading to envelop his entire body in swirling luminous lines. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the surge ended. Zack staggered back, breathing hard. He looked down at himself, and his eyes widened. Gone was his exploration suit, replaced by a sleek, form-fitting armor that seemed to grow directly from his skin. It was a deep, vibrant blue, shot through with pulsing silver circuits. He could feel the heart's power thrumming through every fiber, heightening his senses, quickening his reflexes. He had been remade, reborn. Lyra approached, something like awe in her galaxy eyes. "It is done. You are Zeph now, in spirit if not in flesh." Zack flexed his hands, marveling at the strength he felt. "I feel incredible, like I could take on an entire army." "That is precisely what you must do," Lyra said grimly. "The Vire will have detected the heart's activation. Even now, their ships descend on Zephyria." She waved a hand, and a hologram sprang to life. A monstrous, dagger-shaped craft, bristling with weapons. This is their command ship, the Apex Predator. From it, their leader directs the conquest of each new world. Zack studied the hologram, a cold determination settling over him. "Then that's our target. Cut off the head, and the body will wither." Lyra nodded, pride flickering in her eyes. "You learn quickly, my champion." Over the next few days, she trained him relentlessly in the ways of Zeph combat. The cavern became their arena as they clashed in a deadly dance of whirling blades and flashing energy. Zack's new abilities astounded him. He could run faster, jump higher, strike harder than he had ever dreamed. The heart's power sang in his veins, guiding his movements, sharpening his focus. But for all the physical gifts, it was the mental link with Lyra that truly transformed him. As they sparred, he could feel her thoughts brush against his own, could draw on her millennia of experience and wisdom. They moved as one, anticipating each other's actions, a perfect symbiosis of human ingenuity and Zeph power. In the brief moments of rest, they would sit side by side, Lyra recounting stories of Zephyria's lost golden age. Zack listened in wonder, trying to picture the glittering cities, the vast libraries and academies, the harmony in which the Zeph had lived before the coming of the Vire. A great sorrow welled in him, mingled with a fierce determination. He would not let Lyra's people have died in vain. He would not let the Vire extinguish another world's light. And through it all, something else grew between them. A bond deeper than the mental link, more profound than mere camaraderie. In Lyra's galaxy eyes, Zack saw a reflection of his own soul. The same loneliness, the same yearning for connection and purpose. Her touch electric, sending shivers through him that had nothing to do with the heart's power. But there was no time to explore these feelings, no room for softness in the face of the looming threat. The Vire grew closer each day, and the window for their planned strike narrowed. On the eve of the attack, Zack stood atop the cliff, staring up at the unfamiliar stars. Lyra padded up beside him, her silver fur almost glowing in the starlight. "Do you think we can do this?" he asked softly, not looking at her. "Defeat an empire?" Lyra pressed against his side, her warmth seeping into him. "We must, Zack Walker. For the sake of every species, every world that the Vire threaten." She looked up at him, galaxy eyes swirling with emotion. "And we will. Because we fight for something greater than conquest or glory. We fight for life. For love." Zack's heart seized at the word. Love. Was that what this was? This fire that burned in him when he looked at her? This certainty that he would gladly lay down his life for hers? He had no answers, only the conviction that this was where he belonged. On the edge of this alien world, on the brink of an impossible battle, but with Lyra at his side. He reached out, sinking his fingers into her silken fur. "For love," he echoed, a vow and a prayer. In the distance, the Apex Predator breached the clouds, a harbinger of death and ruin. Zack straightened, the silver circuits on his armor pulsing in eager anticipation. It was time to face the destroyer. Time to fight for the future. Together, the human and the Zeph turned to meet their destiny, hearts aligned and powers surging as one. Whatever came, they would face it as they had come to be. Bound, unbreakable, united. The last defenders of the light. The final confrontation. The apex predator hung in Zephyria's skies like a monstrous blade, blotting out the stars. Zack stood at the cliff's edge, Lyra at his side, the hum of the heart's power thrumming through him. This was it, the moment everything had led to. "Remember the plan," Lyra said, her humanoid form lithe and tense. "We strike fast and hard. Go straight for the command deck. If we cut off their leader, the rest will fall." Zack nodded, silver circuits pulsing on his armor. "I'm ready." Lyra touched his cheek, galaxy eyes swirling with emotion. "You are Zeph now, Zack Walker. In heart, if not in blood. Fight with the strength of our fallen, and the hope of all who still live." Zack covered her hand with his own, savoring her touch, her presence. "We fight together," he said softly. "As one." A fierce, proud smile curved Lyra's lips. Then she stepped back, body shimmering with energy. In a heartbeat, she shifted, the great silver wolf standing in the humanoid's place. "Let us hunt." Zack reached for the power of the heart, felt it surge through him, shining out from the mark on his palm. He raised his hand to the sky, and a beam of pure, searing light shot forth, straight towards the apex predator. The blast struck the ship's shields, energy crackling and dissipating. But it was enough. In the moment of disruption, Zack and Lyra moved. They leaped from the cliff, the heart's power buoying them, carrying them up and up. Zack whooped with exhilaration as they soared, the rush of wind and the thrum of Lyra's presence in his mind making him feel invincible. They landed on the apex predator's hull with a metallic clang, the ship's surface cold and unyielding beneath Zack's armored feet. Instantly, alarms blared and energy turrets swiveled to target them. "Go," Lyra urged, her mental voice like a clarion call in Zack's mind. "I will hold them off." Zack hesitated for a split second, hating the thought of leaving her. But the mission came first. With a final, agonized glance, he turned and sprinted for the command deck, trusting in Lyra to have his back. He could feel her as he ran, a bright, fierce presence in his mind. He felt the surge of her power as she shifted forms, the crackle of energy as she deflected the ship's attacks. The corridors of the apex predator blurred past him as he tapped into the heart's speed, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. And then he was there, bursting onto the command deck in a blaze of silver light. The Vyre leader stood at the center, a tall, cloaked figure emanating an aura of dark malevolence. It turned slowly to face Zack, metal hands clenching into fists. "So," it said, voice a deep, grating modulation. "The last Zeph has found a champion. A pity he will die with her." Zack settled into a battle stance, the heart's energy crackling around him. "Not today," he snarled. "Today, you face justice for your crimes. For every world you've destroyed, every life you've snuffed out." The Vyre leader laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Justice? There is no justice, human. Only the strong and the weak. Only the conqueror and the conquered." It raised a hand, darkness gathering in its palm. "And the Vyre are strong." It hurled the bolt of shadow at Zack, but he was already moving. He leaped aside, the heart's power propelling him, and the blast sizzled past, leaving a smoking crater in the wall. Zack retaliated with a searing beam of light that caught the leader in the chest, sending it staggering back. But it recovered quickly, darkness swirling around it like a living shroud. "Impressive," it rasped. "But futile. You fight for a lost cause, human. The Zeph are gone. Their power fades. You only delay the inevitable." Zack shook his head, silver circuits blazing brighter. "You're wrong," he said, certainty ringing in his voice. "The Zeph live on, in Lyra, in me, in every being that refuses to submit to your tyranny. and as long as even one of us stands. He brought his hands together, energy building between his palms. We will fight. He unleashed the blast, a torrent of searing light that engulfed the fire leader. It screamed, a sound of rage and pain that seemed to shake the very ship. But when the light faded, it still stood, smoke rising from its charred cloak. Enough. It growled, voice thick with fury. Die now, and join your precious death in oblivion. It charged at Zack, dark energy blades forming around its fists. Zack met it head-on, the heart's power surging through him, turning his own hands into glowing weapons. They clashed in a fury of light and shadow, energy crackling and sparking, the very air searing with the heat of their battle. Zack could feel himself tiring, the strain of channeling the heart's immense power taking its toll. But he could also feel Lyra, her presence in his mind lending him strength, her own fierce determination bolstering his flagging spirits. Remember, Zack, her voice whispered across their bond. You do not fight alone. The strength of the Zeph, of all free life, fights with you. Zack gritted his teeth, pouring everything he had into one final desperate strike. His blazing fist caught the fire leader under the jaw, shattering its metal mask, sending it flying across the command deck. It crashed to the floor in a heap of smoking robes and sparking circuitry. Panting, Zack stood over his fallen foe, one glowing hand raised to strike the final blow. But as he stared down at the broken form, he hesitated. This was not the Zeph way. They fought to protect, not to destroy. Finish it, Lyra urged, her presence flaring in his mind. As long as their leader lives, the fire will never stop. Zack shook his head, the glow fading from his hands. No, he said softly. If I kill now, in anger and vengeance, I am no better than they are. He looked up, feeling Lyra's approach. There has to be another way. The command deck doors burst open, and Lyra bounded in, shifting to her humanoid form in a fluid ripple of light. She looked battle-worn but triumphant, silver hair disheveled, galaxy eyes bright. She crossed to Zack, touching his face with a gentle hand. You have the wisdom of a true leader, she murmured, pride and love shining in her gaze. The strength to fight, and the compassion to stay your hand. She glanced down at the fallen fire, lips curving in a thoughtful smile. Perhaps there is another way. Days later, Zack stood on the cliff once more, watching the apex predator lift off from Zephyria's surface. But now, instead of a harbinger of destruction, the great ship was a beacon of hope. Lyra had used the heart's power to cleanse the fire leader of the darkness that had consumed it, breaking the cycle of conquest and hatred. Now, the once feared apex predator would travel the stars, spreading a message of peace and unity, working to heal the scars left by centuries of war. Lyra stood at Zack's side, her hand warm in his. Together, they had accomplished the impossible. They had defeated an empire not with violence, but with compassion, with the power of the heart. What now? Zack asked softly, thumb tracing circles on Lyra's skin. What does the future hold for the last Zeph and her champion? Lyra smiled, turning to face him. Anything we wish, my love. The galaxy is wide and wondrous, full of life and light. And it is ours to explore, to protect, to cherish. She leaned in, galaxy eyes swirling with promise. Together. Zack's heart soared as her lips met his, a kiss that held the thrill of new beginnings, the comfort of a bond unbreakable. And as they stood there, the heart of Zephyria beating in time with their own, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. The human and the Zeph, the defenders of the light, heroes,